Great. Thanks a lot, Dennis. Thanks, Denise and team. Definitely looking forward to a exciting kind of kickoff to the event here. Um, we're going to be talking, a bit kind of about investments around the globe, and honeybees is a piece of the ecosystem. But as we've, I think, all started to realize, you can't look at these industries as piece by piece. There's lots of things that need to come together to have success. So Dennis did a great intro. For me, I'm sitting in Salinas right now in California, and bounce around the state and around the world when we're able to, doing consulting and advisory work. We're launching a new platform called Certified to Grow to help scale ups really get into the market and have more success with adoption rates, and help the industry realize which companies are ready for prime time. So that's something that's exciting for us that we're launching. And then last thing is, we started a company about a year and a half ago called Growers Insight, and that company is focused on working with a lot of institutional investors, but farmers and food companies, helping them build and implement 3 to 5 year technology plans. So I'd like to start with introductions from our incredible global panel that we have here, and then we'll dive into some exciting questions. So why don't we go ahead and start with Derek?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having us and putting this together. Just very briefly, my name is Derek Norman. I'm with Leaps by Bayer, which is Bayer's corporate venture capital group. It was founded in 2015 with the goal of pursuing paradigm-shifting technological advances to solve big society problems. And I think that's a sort of a good fit for the theme today. We invest both, being Bayer, both in the healthcare space and crop science. I lead the food and ag team. We're looking at investing in areas such as reducing the environmental impact of agriculture by reducing nitrogen use, by reducing pesticide use, and creating alternatives to animal protein to lower the greenhouse gas impact of animal production. So just on a personal note, I'm a chemist by training and I'm a hobbyist beekeeper. So I do have a strong personal interest in the topics of this conference also. So.
Great, thanks, Derek. Nicky, you want to go next?
Hi, thank you, Aaron. Hi, my name is Nicky Deasy. I'm a managing partner at the Yield Lab Europe. I'm on my holidays here in Croatia, so I'm about 9 or 10 hours ahead of you guys. It's dinner time here. But anyway, lovely to be here. Very delighted to join you all today. So the Yield Lab Europe, we are a seed stage venture capital focused AgTech fund. So we only do agri-food tech. We currently have 13 companies in our portfolio, and we focus on the sustainability agenda. So we're focused on everything around reducing climate change mitigation strategies as well for agri-food, reducing the amount of chemical inputs, the amount of pollution, animal health and animal welfare, water management, and everything with improving the environmental sustainability, how we feed the planet. So we are based in Europe, and we have sister funds in North America, in LATAM, and also in Asia Pacific.
Great, thank you. Seana, good morning.
Good morning, thanks, Aaron. So my name is Seana Day. I'm a partner with Culterra Capital and a venture partner with Better Food Ventures. Typically, I sit in sunny Turlock, California, which is not far from the almond board. So happy to be based in the heart of California's almond land and ag land. Although today I'm in Western Illinois, so a little bit further away from home. But anyway, what we do is really early stage investing in food tech and ag tech businesses. We've made 9 investments to date, and the theme of our sort of strategy is really IT for food and ag. So looking at software, hardware applications across the food and ag sector, including the messy middle, food processing, food manufacturing, first mile technology. On the Culterra Capital side, we do advisory work for big food and ag companies that are looking at the IT innovation ecosystem and really trying to understand how to navigate strategies around digitalization.
Great, thank you, Seana. And last but not least, Antonio.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm actually at the airport. I'm originally from Brazil. Mandi Ventures is a Brazilian-European fund. We were backed by family offices and high net worth individuals. We started in 2019, and we have 3 startups for now. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and jump into to some questions here, and so we kind of covered a little bit of it, but why don't we start with just talking a little bit more about what the main areas, geographies, and categories are you focusing your investment over the next couple of years, and why? Nicky, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. So in terms of what geographies, we invest in Europe, our fund. Our sister funds invest in other parts of the world. So the fund based out of St. Louis covers North America. My colleagues in Argentina and Brazil cover LATAM, and my colleagues in Singapore cover Asia Pacific. So we invest in all parts of Europe, including the UK and Switzerland. And so we do the European Union and other countries that would be part of the European Economic Area. We don't cover the Middle East, or nor do we invest in Israel. In terms of categories, we invest across agri-food tech. We cover both IT and digital types of technologies, as well as life science and biotech technologies. The main things we look for are strong and deep technology that is complex, and founders who really are leaders in their fields from a technical perspective, and have a strong and unique proposition that is going to be difficult for others to replicate. And combined with that, a strong commercial acumen within the team, that there is capability to take this technology and actually bring it to market, given that we invest generally before companies are really at the point of commercialization. So that's the main stuff that we invest in. And again, the focus for us is always around sustainability and the technologies to enable the industry move from what we believe to be today an unsustainable model of producing food to one where we can produce food indefinitely into the future in a way that is supportive of the planet and the natural world around us, and also provides incomes that are fair for producers and foods that is high quality and safe and affordable for consumers.
Great. Derek, and you touched on this as well, but maybe you want to give us a little more.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I mean, we're from a geography perspective, we're very agnostic. We have a pretty large portfolio, and I was just trying to go through the regions we've invested in to date. So Kenya, so we've invested in Africa, Europe, Israel, US, Brazil, Canada. So we're pretty broad and really agnostic. I wouldn't say we have a geographic strategy per se. We're really attracted to where the breakthrough technologies are. That's really the driver for us. We invest both on life science side and digital side. On life science, yes, synthetic biology is sort of a general area of obviously of high interest. We just sort of have this other area. I mean, we're calling it, like many others, maybe frontier biology. So trying to take new, there's been a huge acceleration in I think in the number of discoveries of biological paradigms that are going on in the life sciences, and we're looking at how do we translate those to new solutions. So on the healthcare side, new therapies, and on the agriculture side, new ways of producing food more sustainably, new varieties of food. Example there, just in terms of some of the frontier biology, targeted protein degradation is sort of an example that's definitely of high interest on the life science side. And then deep technology. So this is sort of digital, but it's, I would say it's probably the modern version of the term digital. Obviously AI, ML, applying that to producing products for agriculture, as well as how to utilize that to practice agriculture better. And obviously, I think there's some interesting applications of that to the specific topics today. So I think that's a quick summary and survey. And then I would just say, Leaps, we can invest very large amounts of capital, but we're stage agnostic. We like to form companies, seed companies. We really like to start with a technology. If it's in a company already, we'd like to invest. Early stage is good. We're also happy to help co-found companies.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
And Antonio, so what areas do you guys focus in a bit more?
We're also geographic agnostic. We invest in food and agri-tech. In the agri-tech side, a lot into biotechnology, a bit on digitalization, and then on the food side, a lot in different clean label and it's kind of biotech as well, so lab grown and plant-based and all those things. And we're really looking for long term. We're a patient capital for real, and I think the thing that shows that is the fact that we've been around for 2 years. We've made 3 investments. We looked at businesses all over 500 businesses. And in terms of stage, we do have a late stage company, which is an American company called Farmers Business Network, but we tend to focus more earlier stage, something kind of seed, Series A, Series B.
Great, thank you. Seana.
Yeah, so we've historically focused on seed and pre-seed stage deals, and by virtue of that, we tend to be more North American focused, just because they're a little bit closer and we can add more value in the process. I cover AgTech for our team, so I've really been focused on in-field technologies, and over the last 18 months, almost all of my time has now been spent in the, like I said before, the messy middle, or the food supply chain tech, which is effectively how we define it, from the farm gate to the loading dock of a retailer food service provider. And within that, we're pretty excited about opportunities that we're looking at now in the first mile. So kind of that farm gate to the processor, the value add primary processing point, food manufacturing technologies. So that's food safety, quality analysis, and then distribution logistics, and finally more demand planning, or those technologies that are closer to retailers. One of the examples of an investment that we did there last year was a company called Fresh, which is really helping to enable retailers to optimize their procurement process in the grocery store. So we really kind of span from seed to stomach, but the areas in the messy middle, or the food supply chain, are increasingly surfacing on our radar.
Great, thanks. So I want to move into a little bit more of a kind of conversation between everybody here. You know, coming from the ag industry and working with lots of different organizations through the years, it becomes a challenge. You know, a farmer needs 40 or 50 technologies that he's going to be utilizing in the next few years, but he doesn't want to work with 40 or 50 different companies to do that. If you look at the traditional tech model, you know, you have the Microsofts and Ciscos that kind of help bundle lots of different technologies together, whether it's their own through acquisition, whether they've internally developed it, or whether they're just partners. So how are you guys, from an investment standpoint, looking at building, you know, collaborative portfolios, helping your portfolio companies work together? You know, just kind of maybe talk a little bit about how you're looking at this ecosystem rather than investment by investment. Anybody can jump in, and we can just kind of have a conversation here.
Sure, I can jump in with an example. I think that the problem is well identified and articulated there, which is sort of how do you sort of knit together the various technologies to sort of change change agricultural practices and keep growers from having to sort of access things on a one-off basis. You know, we invested in a company called Rantizo last year in the drone spraying space, and they're basically confronting that problem. Obviously, I think sort of precision crop protection application in general. So the idea of taking applying crop protection in just a part of the field where it's needed, that is a perfect application or use case, but it requires imaging, analysis, specific application technology, specific formulation. So it's an example of that. Rantizo is really trying to solve that through business model approach. It's a company based in Iowa. They're basically going out and offering as a service to growers the precision drone application of crop protection, basically using off-the-shelf drones. And they've got a partnership with Bayer where we're trying to figure out the solutions Bayer brings to the table there, the special formulations. So I guess to answer your question, there's not a solution, but I think at least it gets Bayer and Rantizo, sort of on the journey to trying to do that. I think that's the goal. I think we sort of know now where we're trying to go, and at least we've taken a first step in the direction in terms of trying to do that.
I'm happy to jump in as well with an example of where we've done was a similar type of approach. So we had a company in our portfolio in the aquaculture health space called Microsymbiotics, which is developing oral fish vaccines. And then we came across another company, another European company, not exactly in the same space, more in the parasite control space, but we thought it was another biotech company with interesting technology. They started a conversation around a partnership which has progressed on to something a lot more substantial than that. And we are now starting to invest into that business as well. So I think there is a role for VC funds to help companies and different types of businesses come together and develop quite substantial, I suppose, integrations of different types of companies. And I think there's also a role as well in having a joined up number of companies where there is a logical step for example, Western Grows to work with different companies. So we would have companies in the pollination space, for example, Apis Protect is a company we've invested in that space. We've companies in the biostimulant space. Microgen Biotech would be an example of that. It's a yield stimulant company as well as taking heavy metals and other pollutants out of our food. We have an alternative herbicide company called Rootwave, which is using electricity to kill weeds, focusing on high value crops that Bayer would know. We've recently closed an investment in a biopesticide company called Salles, which is using small peptide technologies to tackle insect pests in things like aphids and spotted wing Drosophila. We've IT companies working on managing farming operations. We have a French company called Sencrop. We have a company out of LATAM called Aravant, which is substantial operations in Spain and also in the Ukraine, managing large-scale farming operations. So I think all of these technologies do link together. How exactly they will come together into one business, I'm not quite sure, but I think having a range of companies in the portfolio is helpful in engaging with larger corporates and larger farming groups and enabling them to have a joined up selection of technical solutions for the various problems that they face.
Yeah, Aaron, I think would be remiss in not mentioning some of the really interesting work that Western Growers is doing now with the robotics technology stack and really thinking about not only bringing together a diverse set of contributors and subject matter experts to the technology from startups to more developed incumbent companies, but figuring out what should be standardized, what can you kind of gain that competitive or that special sauce around your technology. But for a producer, it then becomes a lot more attractive to have standard components of a tech stack where you can plug in and out the different pieces that again might be specially designed to solve a specific problem. But I think that is a wonderful example of the work that the industry really should be supporting more and more.
Yeah, I agree. We have a company called Provivi, which is a biotech company, and also the partnership with the drone companies and all those things. I think, given it's somehow more of a nascent industry, the different startups tend to help each other, etc., working together. So really, that having that together and having one place where you can control all the different technologies that you have is extremely relevant in our view.
Great, thank you. So, we've seen kind of some shifts happen over the last couple of years, and it seemed like 5 years ago, investors were really focused on IP, and that's how they would get exits. That's how they would get additional funding rounds. That's kind of what the traditional VC model has been built around. In ag, we've had conversations through the years saying, IP is something, but we have to get farmers to use it. And so, or customers, wherever they're at, we have to get some traction here. And so that's been a challenge in the industry. And so, you know, in order to help a company grow, you need funding, of course, you need the talent and technology, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to build a product or do something to make some money, and to produce, you know, to develop a profitable company, or one that's at least, you know, making a substantial difference, and getting the right customers on board. So, you know, in 2017, 2018, I started getting lots of calls from startups saying, we were growing like this, straight up. Now we're leveling off. We're growing 10% a year. What's going on? I said, well, you've built your product and you've gotten stuck with early adopters. You need to really understand what the mass, customer needs, and build your product to that. And so I think a lot of them have been doing that, but there's still a big challenge in kind of connecting these technologies from the early adopters, from that initial idea it works, to how do we get, you know, IoT is a great example. How do we produce, you know, a 10,000 devices instead of 100 at a time? So how are your organizations looking at that, kind of connecting with the industry, helping companies actually build revenue versus IP, sales versus technology teams? Maybe just talk a little bit about, you know, what do you see as important for your organization, and you know, what some of the goals are when you look at startups.
I can just jump in and kind of couch this in the context of exits. And I think, you know, it's a tale of you're right in one respect, but we still certainly see significant IP exits, and look no further than John Deere and their recent acquisition of Bear Flag, Blue River a couple of years ago. You know, those were quite large acquisitions that were publicly disclosed. And really, I think IP was the driver, versus significant revenue contribution. So that's, you know, that's a John Deere example. But then look at some of our Canadian acquirers who have been quite active. You know, TELUS, AGI, building, you know, knitting together solutions for a market that have some revenue. You know, they believe that they have the channels that can significantly accelerate that revenue. So they've got the proof points. They've acquired companies that, you know, have sort of made a meaningful impact. So I think this is, it's a complicated story, and we don't have a clear view yet on what's really driving it. But certainly, you know, traction as we define it, and investors, you know, look at different kind of metrics for traction, whether it be revenue, number of customers, acreage. That is, it's critical, right? I mean, are people using the product? And okay, you know, can we take that is clearly driving some value and put it into a larger distribution channel? That's where the rubber meets the road, I think.
I think if we talk about biotechnology, for instance, the challenges, and that's something that is very interesting and I think very specific of agriculture, the challenges that you have among the different regions, or among even the different size of farming, even if they're in the same region and doing the same thing, tends to be very different. So just as an example, in Brazil, we still have a lot when we talk about, let's say, orange, we still have a lot of the farming done manually, and that's for a cost reason. It's still way cheaper to have 1,000 people working at your farm than automatizing it all. There's also the challenge of connectivity in the countryside when we talk about a country like Brazil. On the other hand, when it comes to biotech, we have 2 seasons in 1 year. So you can test your product twice and accelerate and all those things. So IP, for sure, it's very important, but how you scale your business, how you make a business that will be for the small farmer and for the big farmer, and in the different regions, that's for me one of the biggest challenges that you have in agriculture.
That's well said. I probably, just to build on that, I was thinking in terms of the IP acquisitions, was also, of course, thinking of both Bear Flag and Blue River as examples. But I think, yeah, and to build on Antonio's comments, it's, the scale of agriculture is massive, but it's different everywhere. So it's just very difficult to scale technologies. On the point on IP, I mean, for me as an investor, that's just a proxy for strategic positioning and a little bit of a difficult to copy strategic position. So IP is important, but if there are other ways to protect a strategic position, that is good also. I mean, that's what investors want to look for, because then you need to have that time and protection as you grow and scale your business over time. And then I think maybe just to reinforce what Seana had been saying, I think digital technologies, there's like almost a false analogy that's sometimes made. I mean, digital is very attractive because there's a potential to grow and scale digital solutions very quickly. But in agriculture, which is seasonal and decisions are typically made once a season, that's like the bottleneck. So the rapid scalability of digital technologies is held back by that seasonality. And that's sort of the challenge we're facing.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those points. I suppose how we would see it is it's really around defensibility. I think quite often you see companies that are first to market and they've got a great technology and it's really interesting. And, within a year or two, there's like 20, 50, we see that all the time, this proliferation of companies. So I think anything that we look to invest in, we want to be ahead of the curve and we want to invest in things that are truly different and groundbreaking, but that are defensible. And that, as I would agree with Derek, that might be through IP or it may be through know-how or other assets. But we will always look carefully at how is a company going to fight off a whole plethora of Me Too people that are going to be chasing hot and hard on their tails. And I guess I don't think any business is sustainable if it cannot go to market successfully and build a strong commercialization plan and execute upon that plan and pivot as required, and actually turn its technology into revenues and ultimately into profitability, and have a clear path to that. So I think it's both. I don't think I think the days of it being either or are gone. I think you've got to be able to execute well on both.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go
ahead. No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, to put a finer point on the IP, when we look at it, it's really, can that company, in a cost-effective way, acquire, clean, and analyze that data? That's sort of the IP package that we really look for. And in doing so, are they able to then, continue to do so at scale? So in other words, you can do it for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 customers. Can you do it for 20 or 50 cost effectively? And we've seen, probably more companies that I want to say trip up around that piece of it. So that's, as you're thinking about how important is IP or how valuable is IP, it's, can you do it, and then can you do it at scale?
Yeah, I've seen recently more and more companies saying, "Oh, I haven't actually filed for IP because that takes too long. It exposed what I'm doing." And more with the new technologies like CRISPR and different things, some problems that were almost impossible to solve before, or you needed a GMO or things like that, are starting to change. So it's an interesting new time in that sense.
Yeah, I would say, just maybe those, I agree with both those points. I mean, just to riff on it a little bit, I think on a revenue growth standpoint, that's, for me, there's sort of there's an inflection. I'm not sure where it is exactly, but typically, a company that's sort of getting started is able, through relationships, probably has cultivated hopefully some good relationships with growers to sort of test the technology and maybe get some early revenue. You're always assuming that's probably the case, and then what you want to see is, can they then go to people that are a little bit further removed from their relationship network and make the sale? And probably for different companies, different solutions, that's at a different revenue level. But for me, there's sort of an inflection there. I think a lot of companies can get that first point, which is good, but then it's very challenging. I think it's not a linear. It's very difficult. It takes longer. It's more expensive to get that next set of revenue coming in. And it's I think just a thing I'm always looking at there.
And so this industry has just, since 2014 when we started our first kind of database, today we track about 4,000 digital technology companies in agriculture around the world. And I think there's around 80 accelerators and lots of funds. So there's more funds, more accelerators, but there's also a lot more startups than there were, 5, 7 years ago. So we have relationships with lots of investors and programs throughout the world. And, it used to be, hey, I think this company is really special. You should take a look at them. And they'd have a conversation. Now it's typically great to meet you. Please fill out the information on the website, and you'll run through the process. So the great thing is that there's processes that your organizations are building to help companies kind of float to the top. The question is, how does someone set themselves apart if they're, if you're receiving 500 applications? What are the couple, like, are there a couple things that are super important that trigger, like, we need to take a deeper dive into this company, or this is someone that we should put on our short list? Maybe let's talk a little bit about your thoughts there, because I get asked that question all the time. And a lot of startups say, it's not even worth trying to apply to a program. An accelerator, or if I don't know someone at that investment firm, what's the point? I fill out 50 of these and I get one of them to come through. So what are you guys' thoughts there? What
I would
makes
say
companies
it's
special?
funny you asked the question, because sometimes talking to companies, I mean, in some ways there's so much investment appetite for the space. It's very competitive the other way around. Also, there's a lot of firms chasing a really attractive early stage companies. See, sometimes it feels like the opposite, which is interesting and good, right, for innovation and startups. But and I won't spend a long time answering to let others speak. But one thing I'm always looking for, and I think we at Leaps always look for, is the actual technology, and then some sort of the proof of concept, or something that just goes beyond a speculation or a hypothesis that applying this technology will solve a problem. So just early stage data. I think in ag it's very easy to there's compelling stories, but I think we're always looking for what's the technology that will help solve the problem that's being articulated in that story. So having that is a requirement.
Yeah, I think given, for example, if you compare with fintech, everyone has a bank account and everyone knows the pain points in having a bank account, or everyone eats, so everyone knows some pain points of going to a restaurant or different things like that. And again, I think agriculture here is very specific. You won't know the pain points unless you really understand agriculture, you're on the field. So I think, again, having a background that makes a lot of sense, that being not necessarily a farmer or an agronomist. I myself, I'm not an agronomist. I'm helping on the board of our agriculture businesses in Brazil. But if you understand those things, if you're close to farming, if you understand the different pain points, it's very important. And it's not, again, as common as an industry that everyone deals with it almost on a daily basis. So I think that background, it's not that we wouldn't look or we wouldn't invest, but if it is a biologist doing something biotech, or if it is someone that has a relationship with farming, tends to make more sense. And I think farming became, or AgTech became, quite sexy business. And you have a lot of startups now, and sometimes you come across many startups that it's just like, oh, okay, it sounds like a massive industry, interesting. So that's why I've decided to do. But then when you ask, the person doesn't know what the small specific things about farming.
Yeah, from my standpoint, this is going to sound a little bit ambiguous, but what surfaces on my radar is if everybody's zigging and I find a company or an entrepreneur that's zagging, that's maybe taking a different approach to their route to market, to their business model. Maybe they're sort of in a market that has other competitors, but they've taken a different approach that's sort of defensible, and they've got a really interesting reason why, because they have some unique insight into the market or what's driving the market. That really is an interesting surfacer for me. The other thing I would say that always kind of gets to the top of my list is if a user or a customer says, hey, you should check this company out. That can be because they've had a positive experience, they're seeing value from it. That can definitely be something that rises to the top of my inbox.
Yeah, I think we would echo all of those points. I suppose some of the things we would think about is how unique is the technology? How wow is it? Is it like really, oh my Lord, if we can make that actually bring that to market, that people would be like, wow, that really moves the game forward in a very significant way. And how big is the problem that they're solving? Is it a small problem or is it a big problem? Is it a really big market opportunity? We look at teams as well, in the sense that the teams that we deal with are not complete because they're early stage companies, but that they have real insight and they are realistic about the journey ahead of them, and that they understand that it's not actually sexy. It's far from sexy. It's going to be a massively hard grind, and they're going to be grinding for 5 to 10 years. And it's going to be huge challenges ahead of them and lots of really difficult decisions, and that they have the kind of gumption for all of that and understand that it's not going to be a nice, simple or sexy journey, and that they understand their competition as well, and that they really know their competition, because we'll have seen their competition. So we in a year at the moment, like when we started in 2017, we might have seen 80 to 100 companies a year. At the moment, this year looks like we'll have seen about 1,000 to 1,200 companies by the end of this year. And that's only in 4 or 5 years. So as you said, the growth is huge. And we see all of the competition at a European level. So we would have seen their European competition. We may not have seen their US competition, but our colleagues in US will have, and likewise in LATAM. So do they really understand the competition properly? And that's a good test of the quality of a team.
And go ahead, Aaron, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, we just have a couple of minutes to wrap up here, and we have a question that came through. So maybe we can talk about your quick answer to the question, and then any other kind of wrap up remarks that you want to make, so we can keep everybody on schedule. So, the question is around, we've had lots of conversations with investors and startups through the years that companies will raise money, and then they will, start hiring salespeople and go out and sell a product when they're not actually ready for that product. And so, the product isn't ready for the market. And so this is something I've dealt with in my own companies. It's a challenge just across the industry. That's exactly why we're launching the Certified to Grow platform ourselves, to help kind of companies and as well as the industry understand, where, if a product is ready or not. And so when you guys, are looking at these investments, how are you helping that company decide that they should put money into sales versus versus confirming or building out that product from a technology that standpoint? And then, I think that all kind of comes into the due diligence that you guys do on the companies, as well as it's not good to take money from any investor. You got to look at from a startup standpoint, who a good strategic investor is. So I think those are a couple of other things to look at. But maybe in the last minute here, lightning round, what are your guys' thoughts on where do they put their money as they get investment, and any other last thoughts?
I think I would jump in and say one of the positions that we look for pretty early on to build up the team is customer success. How long does it take to onboard? How does that process work? How often are you checking in with that customer to make sure that they're using the product and that they're having some success? So that, that to me is an integral part of that team build out.
No, quickly, I'll just say, I mean, that's the question, a little bit of a leading question. It probably comes down to what constitutes market validation, right? And, obviously maybe strategically companies can make the wrong decision on when they do have that market validation. And I'll just say maybe use that question to make one more point before my part concludes here, but that you don't necessarily need to raise massive amounts of money to be very successful, either getting your technology out there or financially as an entrepreneur. There's a lot of exits in our space in the 50, sort of 50 million-ish or less range. A lot of those companies were pretty heavily bootstrapped, grew organically, and that's a great path for entrepreneurs to take. So it's something to consider whether you do need to raise that money or to go out and create value.
Yeah, I think the market is massive, and at the same time, it's kind of small. All farmers talk to each other. So if one of them has a good experience, they will talk to each other, and you might get an interesting, an interesting sales cycle. It is a long sales cycle, though. And when we invest in an early stage company, we tend to be that, let's say, salesperson for them, because we're very connected with farmers in different stages or sizes and in different regions. So if it is more of a later stage, then it's a different game.
I would just, from our perspective, just to wrap up, I think if you've got a really, really capable chief commercial officer or CEO who's got an excellent track record and they are scaling up, adding in headcount, and there's a very clever and well thought out plan around that, I think that's great. I think where it's dangerous is people not having the right leadership and the right structures and systems around managing growth, such that you get this kind of just poor quality growth. And that is a real disaster, and that unfortunately spells the doom of many companies. And unfortunately, when that happens, even though the VC funds may have supported that, when it all goes wrong, it's the entrepreneurs who are going to be left, holding the can for that, and in a very difficult position to try and raise more capital. I've just put up our email address. We are open for business. We're actively investing. We invest in about 10 companies a year. We don't invest in North America ourselves. Our US colleagues do. But if you have decks and if you're a seed to Series A stage, anything up to Series A or before, we invest. And I say it's quite broad argument within the agri-food tech space. And do send us in a deck. We're happy to look at whatever it is that the people have. They're raising capital.
All right. Well, I'd like to say thank you to our incredible panel around the globe, and to Dennis and Denise and Silicon Valley Forum for having us, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you
Well
very
done.
much. Have a
Good to
great
see
day.
everyone. Thank you.